Hello, my name is Petrovic. I'm a software engineer at HTEC for 4 years. I have experience in JS technologies for the last 9 years. Today, we will be talking about micro front-end architecture in JS technologies. Starting off from the front-end architectures itself, it's something that's around for quite a while, from the starting of the first web application. And the first one, the OG of all architectures, is the monolith architecture, which is just something that every project itself starts from the beginning, from the monolith architecture, and then grows to either to be micro front-end architecture or just a microservice. So this is in general in any technology, either back-end or front-end. And the specifics of the monolith architecture is that it is basically a simple single code base strategy, which is something that's more suitable for smaller teams. And as the application grows, the team can make a decision if the application will go in the direction to still maintain to be monolith architecture or to evolve into full-on front-end, micro front-end architecture. Regarding that, something that's really a drawback for the monolith architecture for the projects that are along the way, maybe 1 or 2 years, and has a tendency to grow further. It's really hard to maintain all of the code, and it's also hard for having the new team members join and explaining all of the stuff, and it can be a bit frustrating for new people. And it brings a level of complexity into onboarding those people. Also, developing new modules or just the big chunks of features is something that needs to be groomed and needs to be developed on the product side first and then transferred to the development team. So moving on to micro front-end architecture. So this is basically something that as it is title of this presentation, this doesn't mean that it's by itself a better solution other than monolith architecture. It just means that it's more suitable for projects that are growing, and as they increase in number of developers, it's a better way and more maintainable way to work with bigger projects and more features that are coming down the pipeline. So in the sense of micro front-end architecture, something that's really a neat thing to have is that we can have smaller teams, so separated into multiple teams for this example in the front-end technologies, so in JS technologies, and developing all of the applications separate from each other. And actually, those applications could be called also modules if they're part of the same product. Also, this means that different teams don't need to depend on each other, so less dependency overall in the project, and then having separate teams brings a lot less complexity in a sense of having a product separated into different sprints, different product level management, and so on. Also, it is more shareable between teams. So the common components that are developed by different teams could be shared between them, and we will see more about that later on in this presentation. So mentioning the first culprit in this topic is the Webpack itself. So having the React and Webpack work together is something that's been around for a long time. The thing that we leverage the most from the Webpack and the React itself is to create a cohesive application that will make it easier to deploy, to separate into multiple applications. In this sense, we use the latest feature of the Webpack 5, which is module federation, which is the star of the game. And it brings a lot of complexity into developing the application, in a sense that it will bring them all together out of the box. So we don't need to do any of that stuff customly. So writing all of that stuff customly means that we will spend more time and the product will need to wait for that. Module federation is a feature of Webpack 5, which is still work in progress. And the thing that we use the most from it is to separate our modules or pages or just big chunks of the application into smaller pieces. Starting from the beginning, the project was imagined to be a compilation of multiple modules, so multiple separate parts. And this meant that we had to think about micro front-end architecture mindset from the beginning. So starting off from the beginning, we had everything set up to be shareable and independent from each other. In this sense, using the module federation, which is something that is a really big feature of the Webpack 5, is something that we had to implement inside of the React scripts. What we used was Create React App boilerplate library that's provided by the Facebook. And we needed to make some tweaks with it because Webpack 5 is not part of the React scripts at this moment. So we needed to just hardwire some of the stuff to use the module federation. As for the module federation itself, is really well documented, and actually visiting only official website for the Webpack and going into module federation section. For any developer to get to be familiar with it, there is no need to use any third-party tutorials, and just going through the basic documentation will make all of the sense that we need to create our first component and first application that can be shared. And finally, piece de resistance of this presentation will be the demo application, which will summarize all of the mentioned above about module federation, React, and making a micro front-end architecture. This will be presented by Milan in the next section.
Hello, everyone. My name is Milan Milicevic, and I'm currently in HTEC as a JS developer. And today I'll be showing you a demo of our application that uses micro front-end architecture. And also later on, we'll dive into the code and see a simple components that we can create, expose, and use in other applications. Here you can see a container application, which inside of application is a child application number 2 and child application number 1 that are both exposed as a separate application and used combined in the container application. Here you can see the child application number 1 has 2 components. One is an input field and the other one is a button. Here, when you input something and click on a button, you can see in the child application number 2 that a list is showed, and you also have a delete button beside every list item. I'll just add another one. Of course, you can delete any list item that you wish from a list. And for example, if you want to add a couple of more, you can clear whole list from a button that is inside a container application. Beside those components, you can see an image component here in top right and bottom right corners. And of course, all of those components communicate through our provider, custom provider that Mario mentioned previously. And all of them are using a custom React scripts Webpack module. And now we will dive into the code and see how it looks in the technical side of the application. Now we are inside the child application number 2, and as you can see, it's a pretty simple application that has a list, map lists, and in every list item there is a div that contains an item and a button on which you can click and delete an item. You can see here on the line number 7 that the button is imported through a React lazy loading feature. And here you can see the name of the component you wish to import into application. You can see that the button is imported from child application number 1 from /components and the button. That you can take that as a path in which the button is created. In order to import a button and use it inside of your application, there is a couple of things you need to set up. First thing is to go to package.json, and inside of the package.json file, you will see a federation key that has a lot of properties that you need to set up in order to use a module federation, as Mario mentioned earlier. First key that we are going to use is the name of the application that we want to use in other application. For example, in our application, we can see that the name is M&M, Micro Front-End, Child App number 2. The next key is a library and has two keys, type and name. Name is, of course, the name of the library you want to export, and the type, in this case, is var. Next key we want to set up is the path to which a file will be bundled, all of the components that you want to expose from this application. In our example, in our path, static.js remote entry.js will all components live because Webpack will bundle and put it inside of that file. Next key is the exposes key, which tells us which component we wish to expose and what is the location of that component. And for example, here you can see we are exposing a whole app and component image. A path where the component app lives is /source/app, and the path for the image component is source/components/image component. Next key is remotes, which tell us what's the name of the application we are exposing. And here we define it as a M&M, Micro Front-End, child application number 1, which is the name of our application. And next, and the last key in module federation that's important to us is shared, which tells us what libraries are shared between application or between micro front-end applications, and we need to specify a version for each of the libraries we are using. And for example, you can see here that we are using Material UI Core, and it's set to 4.11.0 version. In case that some application uses a higher version of our library, it will fall back to the lowest version where it was set. For example, if we have in our child application number 2, this library set as a 4.15, and in our application child number 2, we have a 4.11, all applications will be using 4.11 version of that library. Also, for each library, you can specify if it is a singleton and what is the required minimal version of a library. Next file that is important to us in order to set up a whole micro front-end architecture is an index.html file. Here, you need to import a script or that file that we were talking about that is exposing all of the components you wish. And here you can see that we are using a script tag which has a source React app child application number 1. We've put this environmental variable in our env.development named as React app child app, and here you can see that it's running on localhost 3001-static-js.remote-entry.js. One thing to notice here is that all of the application must be running in order to use their components. And for example, our application number 1 is running on port 3001. Our application number 2 will run, as you can see here, on port 3002. And our application that is a container will run on a port 3000. Moving on to child application number 1. Same to the child application number 2, application number 1 is a simple one. Here you can see there is only a form which contains of an input and a button which is type submit. Also, the button and the input component are defined in this application. Here we can see a button is a simple component that uses a onClick handler function and has a type that you can set through a prop. This component here is exposed and used in a previous child application number 2 that we just saw. Another component that is created in child application number 1 is an input component. We can also see that the input component has a type text and has a handler on change. Now we will look at the package.json file and see how those components are exposed. You can see here under the name of in the federation key, there is a M&M micro front-end child application number 1, and file name are the same as in the child application number 2. The difference between those components is the exposes key, which tells us what components this application is exposing. And we can see that this application is exposing an app, a component /input, which is located in source, components, input folder, and a button, which is located in a source, components, button component. Also, the name, which is the application we will try to import later, is the M&M micro front-end child application number 2. Also, as I mentioned in the previous application, we need to set up a URL to the application we are importing components from. And in this case, we are using our React app child number 2, which is defined in our environmental variable. Here you can see a React _app _child _2. It's running on a port 3002, which we specified in a previous application, and our application child app number 1 is running on a port 3001. Now I'll show you how the container application looks. It's a bit complex than the previous 2 applications, but it's for a reason, because in the container application, child application number 2 and child application 2 will live and use all of the components we previously created. Here you can see that all of the components are wrapped inside a React suspense component, which is used to have a fallback when the components are loading. Next, we see a button, which we see in a demo, that clears the lists. Every component that we are using needs to be wrapped around the error boundary component, that is our custom component I will show you later, which tells us if some application does not successfully run and throw an error. First error boundary is an image, or should we say 2 images, one located in the top right corner and the one located in the bottom right corner. Now we can see that child application number 1 and child application number 2, each of them position left and right for easier detection. As you can see here, all of the components we are using are imported from another applications. For example, child application number 2 and button are imported from child application number 1, and here are the paths or the name of those components located in the child application number 1. Also, child application number 2 and image component are imported from the child application number 2, and all of the components are loaded using a React lazy loading system. In package.json file, you can see all of the other stuff we mentioned previously, but now, because we are not exposing anything from our container component, we don't have a key exposes that tell us what we are exposing. But you can see here that we have a key remotes that contains both child application number 1 and child application number 2. Also, in index.html file, you can see that we are both importing components from child application number 1 and child application number 2, and then we are using a script tag with the source property. Both of those properties are located in our environmental variable. You can see here child application number 2 and child application number 1. And respectively, you can see their URLs. Now, I'll show you how can you create a couple of components, expose them from application, use them in another one, and how they will communicate with each other. First, I'll create a heading component in child application number 2. Our heading component will have a simple H2 tag, which will show a text from our provider that is used in our application. Now that we've created a heading component, we will try to expose it from this application. In order to expose a heading component from our application, we need to tweak a little bit our package.json file. Now that we've exposed our heading component from application number 2, we'll go to application number 1 and create another component. Now, in child application number 1, we will create a text input component, which we will use in combination with our heading component to display some text. Text input component will be a simple one, which will have a text area that has our own change event handler that sets a text that will be showed in our heading component that we previously created. Now that we created text input component, you can see a couple of things. First is that we are using our custom provider, useMNM, which sets the text on a change event handler. And of course, you will need to export a default component, which will be later imported in our child application number 2. Also, as we did in our child application number 2, we need to expose the component we just created. So, under the exposes key, we need to add our created component. Now that we created and exposed our text input component, we can use it in our child application number 2. In our app.tsx file, I will add another container which will hold our text input component from child application number 1. Now that we imported our text input component in our child application number 2, we can notice that it is surrounded by our React suspense component, which will have a fallback, a simple paragraph that says loading text input. Okay, here you can see that our text input component needs to have a tsignore comment, because the current version of Webpack 5 that we are using does not support extension that tells us which component is important and which is in our current application. Now we will import a heading component in our child application number 1. Now we've imported a heading component in our child application number 1, and as you see in a previous child application number 2 example, here we wrapped a component inside a React suspense component that has a fallback, a simple paragraph that says loading heading. Also, we needed to use a React lazy loading module to import our heading component. Now, to see if the expose components are working as predicted, we will run both applications and see if there are some errors. Now that our application is started, we can see that there is nothing displayed. First thing we need to do is to check our developers tools to see if there are any errors. In our console, we can see there are some errors. Here, you can see that importing a component using a lazy load module is wrong. To see what is the problem in our application, first I need to check if I've imported everything correctly. Here, I can see that I've imported a heading component from my child application number 2, which is good. Now that I'm back in my child application number 2, inside the heading component, I can see I forgot to export a default heading. So now I'll add a default export. Now, after loading our child application number 1, we can see there are some components and the components are displayed now. So there are no errors in child application number 2. Now let's look at our application number 2. Here we can see an error that suggested that our name or the component name that we try to import is not correct. So let's take a look. Here in our application child app number 2, I can see that I made a typo. Now, when I fix the typo, I can see a content in our child application number 2, which is a text area. Now that we created our components in both child application number 1 and child application number 2, we want them to use in a container application and combine them so to see how they communicate through our custom provider that we created. Here, in child application number 2, you can see our text input component, which is created in child application number 1, but it is used in our child application number 2. Here, when I input something, you can see that the text is displayed in our heading component, which is living in a child application number 1, but created in our child application number 2. This is the mindset you need to have in order to create a micro front-end application and use them across all other containers that you wish to create. That's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. In the comment section below, you can ask us any question you like.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
Milan and Mario. Sounds like double M, M&M team. Amazing. It was really sweet how we were looking, on really details, and Milan was also commenting another on them, really liking the live coding demo. So congratulations. It was great to see how you did it. and we'll have a few questions for you. Since we have a slogan, not just to deliver, but actually delight, not just deliver. I have a question for Milan first. In delighting in Java, Java, what do you like most about being engineer at HTEC, doing what you do?
Yeah, there are several things I'd like to mention. The first one that comes to my mind is people and the culture in our company. So all of the people that I met so far are very friendly, very open. All of them are also technically good engineers, and they're always ready to help you with everything you need in order to do your job. So that's the first thing, and the second one that is maybe the most important is that not only they're looking to help you in your job, but also to help you outside of your job. To be there as your friends, to hang out outside of the job and things like that.
Great. So you get not just colleagues, but even new friends.
Yeah.
I didn't check. Do we have even some couples in HTEC? That get married. Meeting each other since you're so busy. With work. Mario, would you like to add something? With how is your experience?
Yes, as far as the whole company and individual teams, we're all working together really closely and delivering all of the requirements and the project expectations as best as we can, and that creates a sort of a really good battle scenario and battle friendship. So, as Milan already said, a lot of people in the individual teams organize their separate team buildings that are aside from the HTEC and their individual initiatives. So that brings people a lot together and just brings more of that energy back to the work, to the project, and to the life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mario. Since we all work in engineering in a way, better future, but it's important also what do we see in the front. What are your favorite types of front-end development projects to work on, Mario?
I mean, as far as the technologies go, everything works as far as it brings the ultimate value or brings the vision of people that bring the ideas and everything to everything be materialized. So technologies are all being developed at the present time, and everything that, as I said, delivers an idea is good. So none of the technologies are favorite or, let's say, being favoritized by any engineer, except for maybe doing something for a long time and doing it well. But as far as maybe the types of projects, setting up a new project is always a really good challenge and a very interesting thing to do, because we get to tailor everything by our, let's say, personal specification, or just to put everything together to be as best as we can do it, because joining already built project is always, let's say, learning curve, and everything needs to be as the conventions are already set. But it doesn't mean that they are worse than the fresh project. But as far as personally, maybe Milan has another preference.
Yeah, I also like starting from the start, from the fresh project also. But I also like some exciting challenges, for example, not ordinary problems and stuff like that.
It's I can see why they say that where creativity meets deep engineering, because there's really, if you want to start from the blank sheet, you really have to have a lot of creativity, to start, not just to follow. That's what they say usually, that the difference between people working in HTEC and just let's say compare. Sometimes they ask us, when you work with Indian company, it's like comparing somebody being really racing driver, being really in details with every curve, or just taxi driver from A to B, putting in GPS, just follow the coordinates. In a way, you have to be really, really creative to find, to crack, all the problems and challenges on the way. Yeah? And to look on the third questions, what do you do when you're unsure? Let's say there are sometimes probably challenges that you're not sure how to achieve the goals on the project or that you're working on. Milan, how do you work in this situation?
Yeah, I personally prefer to talk with other teammates, other colleagues, to hear about their opinion on the specific problem or a topic, to maybe look from some different point of view about the problem, in general, to talk more about the problem, then I can figure out maybe how to solve it in a different way. Yeah, so that's the approach that I have, and maybe the advice I would like to give in future for somebody else in order how to solve a complex problem or not ordinary problem.
Yeah, I would like to add maybe to this, and maybe it's connected to the previous question actually. It's the fact that on all of the projects that we've done so far, we have a really good support from our mid-management or directly connected to us. And we have, let's say, total freedom as far as it's constructive. And it brings a lot of dynamics to our team. We can decide, we can own the solution that we create. So even though if we go, let's say, on the wrong path, we will learn a lot of stuff and just take that experience, make it into something maybe productive down the line. So, yeah.
Always finding, in a way, the art of possible, let's say, where are the limitations and going even beyond. Yeah. Good. Yes. And I have another question for Mario. Maybe what is the most, let's say, difficult part of being a team lead? How do you motivate your team? How do you lead through change? There's engineers are not easy people, let's say, to manage.
I can say firstly that I'm part of a really great bunch of people. So the whole team is just a group of phenomenal people, technically wise, and just great people to work with and to live with, let's say. And and maybe adding that to the position of the team lead is something that gives me a big joy. And as you said, the difficult part maybe comes that I'm a sort of a gatekeeper for the culture and for the overall vibe of the team. And having that responsibility gives me a lot of, let's say, strength, even though it's really challenging sometimes. Being on, let's say, committee or group of people that decides if someone will join the team, which team will they be joining in. So yeah, as far as the motivating people, since they're a really great group of people, myself, I'm motivated a lot by them. So I guess it's just reciprocity between us and just motivating each other. So and and going forward, it's a really delight to work with all these people and to just probably lead with a good example from my side. And I guess maybe all of the people that are involved in leading any team or leading any group of people will just say the same, probably.
Mm-hmm. Do you like to work in, for a question for both of you, in bigger or smaller teams, or lead in bigger and smaller teams? What do you prefer?
Yeah, I guess maybe my preference would be to go with a smaller team. It's probably easier to maintain and maybe have more, let's say, creative freedom to develop a lot of stuff individually. Because if we are broken down into the smaller pieces, smaller teams, we don't depend on each other that much, and then we can just deliver more, as we already talked in the micro front-end architecture presentation. So it's not something that's let's say 100% preferred, but in a lot of times, maybe me personally, it's a really good thing to do in smaller teams.
Yeah, I agree totally with Mario. I think the organization is much better in a smaller team, but technical wise, you can learn much more maybe in a bigger team where there are a lot of people, with a lot of different background and experience I mean, you're exchanging your opinions and experience. You can gather you can pull the best from each other. So both bigger teams and smaller teams have their pros and cons.
So if you know that you regularly practice Scrum, do you know what is the exact number of rugby players where Scrum is coming from?
I would say maybe 10.
Yeah, I think it's more, but I'm not sure how much.
15. I was cheating. I checked on Google, so don't worry. So, and exactly, 15. It's kind of by rugby, by tradition, in a way, the maximum limit for the Scrum. And how do you use Scrum, let's say, and sprints in your teams?
Yeah, it's just let's say maybe always on different projects that are different versions and maybe subversions of a Scrum process, but usually we go by the sprints, usually either 1 or 2 weeks. It's usually 2 weeks, and we have all of the structure that let's say requires a project to go down the line in a productive way. So having 2-week sprints, having everything planned beforehand, to have everything planned in the sprint and just start coding and everything. So we also had a lot of experience, great experience from the previous projects and the current project. The people that lead all of those non-technical things are just amazing group of people, and they give a lot of value, and they make our jobs easier. So shout out to them.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mario, and I think that since the agile methodology is the one that we are using in HTEC, very important today, because technology is developing so rapid today that you can't comprehend all the things that comes out every day. So I think that kind of a project management style is very good for me personally, and I think for the whole company.
Great. It's amazing. When I was talking with one of the clients, that as I mentioned, that we did in one company already more than 300 innovation sprints. And they said, how do you sprint, so long? And it's easy, company gets to valuation, already funding more than 2 billion, inside. And I understand now, what is the value of all this? It's not only about sprinting, but about the results that you bring with the partners actually to clients.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have any question from audience, welcome. Milan and Mario are here, ready to answer a few questions. Don't ask too hard questions, like number of Scrum members. Good. It's really great to see what you do live. And then when I was looking at the participants, it was also interesting to see a lot of young people actually learning, how the IT works and how the developers actually should work. And I hope that since Emirates just published, they were offering 100,000 golden visas, just to move to Emirates, to Dubai. I hope that people will not just learn on Tech Forward, but also join HTEC and not just join Emirates, no matter the golden visa that they offer. Good. No question for the moment. Do you have something else, Milan and Mario?
Yeah. I would like to add. I would like to add about the sharing culture that we have in our company. The main idea behind this Tech Forward is, of course, to share our knowledge with everybody. And I think today it's maybe one of the important things to share your knowledge, to hear from different sources, because we are not competing between each other. We are trying to achieve the same goal, and sharing the knowledge is the one way, and I think the only way to go to the goal.
Yeah, I just agree 100% with Milan.
Great.
We agreed on this comment, so I guess no need from my side to repeat it.
Yeah. You can see, the culture is there. You two fit, perfectly on the project and together on with the culture. Great. So since we just fulfilled the school hour, let's say 45 minutes, I know your time is really, really precious. So I would like really to thank you in the name of HTEC Group and all the team to share things Please, looking forward to listen to you again, and hopefully, yeah, of course, we will record all this, share with people that maybe missed today, and if there are some more questions coming, we will be ready, I hope, also to answer in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Nico, and I would like to thank all of the participants of this Tech Forward meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.